and welcome again to another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. I'm Bill Current, founder of the Current Consulting Group, and you can find a new episode of Currently Speaking on all the major podcast platforms every week. Every Thursday, we post a new episode. You can also go to currentconsultinggroup.com, and in our archives, you'll find past episodes of Currently Speaking. We've been doing this for a little over a year now, and so there are dozens and dozens of episodes on there. So go to currentconsultinggroup.com, go to YouTube and look at our YouTube channel, and you'll find past episodes of Currently Speaking. And like it, subscribe, share it with others, help us grow our viewership. We want to get the word out to as many people in the drug testing industry as possible that Currently Speaking is available. So we're about to launch into this episode, and I'm going to introduce my special guest today. But before I do so, one of the things that we've been doing at the Current Consulting Group since 1998, when I started the company, is writing drug testing policies. It's been a big part of our industry. It's the core service. In the early days before we expanded into all the other things that we do, that's basically what it was, just writing drug testing policies. And the interesting thing about that is before I started this company, I worked for a third-party administrator called Employee Information Services, EIS. And actually, we went through a number of different name changes in the time that I was there. But right next door to me, right next to my office, was Christine Clearwater, who's our guest today. We'd known each other years before that, but we both ended up working at Employee Information Services. And Christine was in charge of policy development services. So when a client needed a policy, Christine led that charge. She was the person in charge of policy development, and it was sort of, her area of expertise that was unrivaled by anybody else. And so whenever I was dealing with a client and they needed a policy, I would just literally walk next door to the office next to mine and say, Christine, I've got a company that needs a policy, and she would take it from there. And then we both left EIS around the same time, close, and started our own consulting businesses writing drug testing policies. So a lot of what I learned about writing drug testing policies, I learned from Christine Clearwater. And so Christine, welcome today to Currently Speaking. It's so great to have you on as a guest. And before we start, let me just tell the audience, Christine started her business I don't know, Christine, what year was it that you started Drug Free Solutions Group?
2000.
Okay, so
it's just a year after you.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And she's been very successful. And her core business is helping companies establish drug-free workplace programs so that they have safe workplaces. And she had this company going for over 25 years. And last year we decided to merge our two companies together. So Drug Free Solutions Group became part of Current Consulting Group, and Christine became senior consultant for risk management services. Now, Christine, did I get all of that right, or did I miss anything?
You did great. You did great. We've crossed paths so many times. It's well done. Thank you for that. So,
and I have to tell the audience, I know most of you are familiar with my career, but before I started Current Consulting Group and before I worked with Employee Information Services, years and years before that, I worked at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for a group within the chamber called the Institute for a Drug-Free Workplace. And that was like in the late 80s, early 90s. And that's actually where Christine and I worked. Christine, tell us a little bit about what you were doing back in those days.
Well, I'm not going to start back when I was born, but I will say that at one point I was working at MIT. I ran a division at MIT for 8 years, and I suddenly moved to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Now, what makes a woman leave a good job to go? A man, of course. So I had just gotten married and he got transferred. So we went to Winston-Salem, and I had the great fortune to have an opportunity to be hired by Sara Lee Corporation to put together a program which would help small businesses with substance abuse issues, i.e. policy, drug and alcohol testing, training. So they paid me to learn. And I had from there, within 5 months, I opened the doors and had an incredible audience of governors and mayors and corporate executives. And within 5 months, I had 180 companies using the services. and it was meant to be for the county, and it ended up having an 8-state impact within that 5-month period. So that's what started me doing drugs. All right, I
so to
started
speak.
doing drugs then. Yeah.
Yeah.
So from there, I came up and started working with the Stepman organization, Bob Stepman, who had come out of DEA, number 2 out of DEA worldwide. And that's shortly thereafter. We were working with large corporations to start with, corporate, that 1,000 kind of, the top 1,000. And they're just very big, and our hearts fell into that for small and medium and large, medium-sized businesses is kind of where the direction went. At that point in time, that's when we became employee, where you and I connected more directly. So I've been in the industry basically since '89, which is really the beginning of the drug-free workplace
Yeah.
initiatives. So I've been doing drugs a long time, and I have loved the industry. It's a very narrow niche. It's a very deep niche of risk management, but it's a very profound niche for having an impact on safety and bottom line for a company. So it's been very fulfilling to do
So,
so.
Christina, and I mean, I kind of can guess your answer to this, but you've been doing this so long. You've worked with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies. You've seen a lot happen. What are some of the biggest changes in the world of drug-free workplace that you've seen over your long career?
You know, it's um, I would venture to say I've worked with over 1,000, 1,500 companies before I joined CCG, and of all sizes and shapes and industries and what you can imagine. But I think that it was a lot simpler early on, and it was not as complicated, and it was kind of easy to address it if companies didn't know what they didn't know. And so it's just advising them that this is really an important issue, and they were very amenable. Policies weren't all that complex. Um, and I think what's happened in the trend with the growth of drug use, and certainly marijuana, that it has become more complicated. It doesn't for the company, it is for the industry at large, and how we put together policy to make it straightforward for them. But I think employers are really struggling with things like it's harder to find employees, it's harder to retain employees. I'm concerned about litigation. I'm concerned about lawsuits. There's certainly confusion over marijuana. Don't know even how to address it. Don't even want to address it. I'm overwhelmed. So I think that with the increase of the kind of drugs that have come to, opiates became a big trend at one point. Now marijuana comes into the play. So policy is more and more critical for a company to take on. Policy is really a policy. It's not a program. A lot of people think a policy is a program, or they call their policy a drug testing policy, which it's not. Drug testing is just a component of a policy. So policies today have changed, and they've become. You have to be more critical of the steps you take, the procedures you take, being aware of state law, because that's come to play much more than federal law. Way back, federal law really drove what happened and what didn't happen, and now federal law has sort of stepped away and deferred to the states to establish how they want to position the issues, and so it becomes critical for companies to know state law and how that affects them, particularly not only if they're single state, but if they're in multi-state. So it has changed. It's changed a great deal. Also, the percentage of those we're now seeing about 70% of Americans are employed, are using. And we've got people who are, we've got about 77 people who use before work, and a significant number who use on the way to work. We even, an interesting study showed that 43% are using at work, whether it's between breaks and so on, or literally while working. So it is very present. It didn't have that level of presence years ago. So it has become a much more significant impact on the workplace. And the impact has been on multiple levels. It's been on levels of productivity and absenteeism. Someone is a substance abuser, they're more likely to be absent, or when they are there, they're less productive. So if they're not there or they're less productive when they're there, how much isn't getting done in a day, in a week, in a month? And of course, more workers' comp claims and more expense to medical benefits. And it's not they don't use their medical benefits for their substance abuse problem. It's all the secondaries. So there are lots of ways it's come to play a much stronger impact on the company, operationally and bottom line. So it has changed a great deal, and it's become much more, I would say, sophisticated in a way.
So when you're working with a company, you're not just talking about drug testing, obviously. You're talking about a comprehensive approach to creating a safer workplace with a drug-free workplace program. And so what would be the components of a comprehensive program?
Great question. In the case of a policy is the cornerstone. That's your baseline. And that's your kind of your Bible, if you want to use that expression. You know, that's what's going to lead you through down the path. And I think that the policy, generally speaking, many companies think a one-pager or a two-pager policy is sufficient. When to cover all the issues, it needs to be comprehensive. If it's going to, one, cover all the issues and give all the steps an employee needs to take when something occurs. So in the case of a policy, you certainly want to set up who has to comply with it, and is there going to be support for them if there is a problem. But what are the prohibited conducts? What are the rules? The rules need to be laid out, and you can't just say drugs and alcohol are not prohibited, because the word drug has a lot of implications to it. And the word alcohol, I see it time and again where companies say consumption of alcohol is not permitted. And the moment you ask the question, well, do you have Christmas parties? Do you have picnics? Do you entertain customers or clients? Do you go off to association meetings, training sessions, i.e., areas where alcohol may be consumed? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just defining it. It's just making sure you carve out those times where it's appropriate and also how much. So setting up the right rules as it relates to drugs in general, possession, consumption, and storage, how to handle marijuana. So it's a complex document setting up what's prohibited, what's permitted, and then forms of testing. Which forms of testing pertain to that organization? You can have 3 manufacturing companies, and they'll have 3 different plans for testing, and they'll have 3 different policies. So what is critical in a policy is that it reflects the company's culture, its management style, and its exposure to risks and losses. And they're all different. Every company's different.
Say, for example, a company's in multiple states, so different state laws are going to apply to how you put their policy together for them. But let's say, for example, and let's just take one of those components, let's say consequences.
I was
What
just
are the options?
correction. Nice segue. Yeah.
Yeah, so what are the options that an employer can consider, and then, based on state laws, what ends up in a policy?
Just setting up a policy for that particular company and where they stand on the issue. And then being cognizant of the state in which they operate and what they have to comply with. So in other words, getting a policy which is where key management stand on the issue. It's not a moral issue. It's not an ethical issue. It's not a personal issue. It's business. It's just a matter of business. So how do you set it up? And once it's set up, then you have to address, based on your decisions, I'm multi-state, can I do that? Or I'm single state, can I do that? Based on the state or states in which I operate. So it's critical, absolutely critical, that based on the states in which they operate, they have all the information they need, everything from any kind of restrictions or protocols, how it relates to workers' comp or unemployment, if there's required education, if there's worker comp benefit programs. So there's a lot there in each state. Some states are very active in their position and have a lot of things to think about, some states less. So, and then of course, when it comes to marijuana, that's another issue. You've got marijuana where you've got 9 states that haven't legalized it at all for any reason. At this point, we've got 20 states that have legalized it but said you don't have to accommodate in any way. We've got 21 states who have said you can't be under the influence. They all say you can't be under the influence or possess at work. But some states, about 22 states, have legalized and said you can't discriminate against someone who has a medical marijuana card, which is not as restrictive as you think. And then, of course, there's recreational marijuana. We have about 24 states who are operating with recreational marijuana. So it's simply knowing, and very important to know, what in that state do I have to pay attention to. And then, so for instance, if they're multi-state, they have a policy for how they want it. And then they would have an amendment or state amendment for each state they operate in. So let's say, Bill, you and I operate out of Florida, okay? But we operate in New York, New Jersey, California, okay? So some forms of testing, you can only do safety-sensitive positions, higher risk. Some don't allow random. Some have very strict rules about testing, what technologies you can use. So I think that the idea here is that it's very important for companies to build a policy that they like, that represents them, but they're very aware of state law. And state law is changing. Some policies are changing. So it's critical to stay up to date, and really updating a policy, including the state law, is really something that has to happen every couple of years because it's very fluid today. It's in motion.
Okay, so that concludes part one of my two-part interview with Christine Clearwater. You can find past episodes of Currently Speaking at our website, currentconsultinggroup.com. You can also go to our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to catch part two, you'll find it at YouTube and all the other major podcast platforms as well. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Currently Speaking.